This is part 2, episode 69. Wang Qiu's face was as cold as ever as she raised the golden dragon spear high above her head. She released the powerful golden aura from before, riveting golden light radiating from her body. The cutting aura was like the sharp edge of a blade as it forced the large mass of beast souls back. What's going on? Hui Yuhao was astonished and amazed and doubtful at the same time. Never in his wildest dreams would he have expected that Wang Qiu could form an alliance with this female dark golden terror claw bear in battle. It seemed like she didn't intend to block the bear when she charged in its direction, and was trying to direct it instead. What kind of ability was this? It was simply too terrifying. Did that mean that someone who possessed the golden dragon martial soul had the ability to command dark golden terror claw bears? The dark golden terror claw bear's existence was actually comparable to the golden dragon in terms of lineage. Right when Hui Yuhao was still feeling shocked, the female bear stomped her enormous paws as she charged towards the three brothers. Her body erupted with intense dark golden light as her fur stood on end. Her talons extended from her paws, and huge claws that were at least 2 meters long flickered with chilly light. Her claws crossed each other through the air as countless blade shadows flashed by and reached every corner in a 100-meter radius around her. The beast souls were highly resistant to physical attacks, but the bear's attacks were simply too sharp, and the beast souls were weakened wherever the blades crossed. The three brothers immediately felt an agonizing heartache. They had already lost many beast souls when they came to hunt and slay the male bear, but the male bear's addition had made up for their losses in the end. This continuous battering caused them great suffering, as every beast soul was ultimately part of their strength and fighting ability. 2 grey clouds moved out in an instant, and the beast souls retreated along with them to the periphery. Zhong Lidi and Zhong Liren glared at Wang Qiu, who was still sitting on the female bear's shoulders. The bear couldn't have broken through their siege so easily if it hadn't been for her. The bear didn't care about all this at this moment as she strode towards her lair. There was nothing more important to her than her cubs. All of a sudden, a scarlet golden beam of light arrived on the scene in a flash, and a majestic scarlet gold lion intercepted her. This mighty lion seemed like it was sculpted from scarlet red crystal, and it flickered with brilliant colors. Even the dark golden terror claw bear's fearsome aura was weakened the moment it appeared. The scarlet golden lion was just a beast soul, but one could tell from its aura that it had possessed at least 30,000 years of cultivation. Of all the soul beasts that Hui Yuhao had seen, besides the several mighty ones that had more than 100,000 years of cultivation, this scarlet golden lion was probably the strongest one in terms of fighting ability. The scarlet golden lion roared into the sky the moment it appeared. Its muscular body that seemed almost material proved how drastically different it was from normal beast souls. The dark golden terror claw bear paused momentarily, but anything that prevented her from protecting her children was considered an enemy at this moment. She lashed out ferociously with her right claw, and it was a dark golden terror claw that contained every ounce of her strength. The colossal claw seemed like it was going to tear the sky apart as it descended from the sky and slapped down fiercely. The lion wasn't weak, and it shook its head as a large spherical light projection emanated from its head and immediately expanded to a diameter of more than 10 meters. This light projection was actually the enlarged image of its own head. Clang! The bear's claw was bounced back after the sharp collision, and an intense tremor almost shook Hui Yuhao off of the cave wall. The lion's radiance dimmed for a moment, but quickly returned to normal, and it roared ferociously once more. This lion could actually take a hit from her. It lived up to its name as an entity that was comparable to the dark golden terror claw. Hui Yuhao had been observing the brothers' beast souls this whole time. He realized that most of these beast souls could only use spiritual attacks, and they used spiritual power to get through to their opponents. However, there were several relatively formidable ones that retained the ability to attack with soul power, and this scarlet golden lion was undoubtedly the best of the best in this category. Hui Yuhao even felt that this lion probably still had almost as much strength as it had when it was still alive. Another sphere of grey fog separated from the lion while Hui Yuhao was still feeling astounded. It transformed into a shadow riding on the scarlet golden lion's back, the eldest of the brothers, Zhong Litian. Zhong Litian's expression wasn't much better than those of his brothers. He had never thought that his plan could be ruined like that, at the hands of a young woman. "Who are you?" Zhong Litian exclaimed as he raised the staff in his hands. The lion charged forward ferociously, and it engaged in battle with the bear as he levitated in midair and gazed at Wang Qiu in the distance. Wang Qiu said coldly, "Someone that wants your life." Her 6 soul rings sparkled brilliantly as she spoke. Zhong Litian snapped his head around at Zhong Lidi and Zhong Liren. "Have we succeeded?" Zhong Lidi's face was black as he replied, "All gone, there's nothing left." It seems like this company isn't that easy to deal with. What should we do? Jean Letien's eyes narrowed as a savage aura burst from his body. He said coldly, "Release our origin beast souls. Every single one of them has to die. We won't have to worry about getting what we want as long as they are dead." Jean Lidi and Jean Liren began to move right when his voice dropped, and two beams of light glowed from their bodies. The jewels at the tips of their staves erupted with brilliant and blinding light. However, Wang Qiu's action also immediately triggered the Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor's wrath. A streak of brown light instantly circled and flickered around the bear crazily. The spear in Wang Qiu's hands waltzed continuously. Even though she could accurately predict and grasp the opportunity to defend against the leopard's attacks every time, and she was able to hold on with her own fearsome strength, she only had 6 rings. It was not difficult to imagine how powerful these beast souls were, since they were these 3 brothers' origin beast souls. Their soul skills were all meant to amplify their beast souls, and their martial soul true bodies in the fog made them incredibly fast, while most physical attacks simply couldn't hurt them at all. The 3 brothers separated in 3 directions as circle after circle of light expanded and continuously amplified their origin beast souls. The truth was that the 3 brothers had no choice but to release their origin beast souls. They would never use their origin beast souls under normal circumstances, as these origin beast souls were tied to their own spirits even though they were extremely powerful. They would also be wounded if any harm came to their origin soul beasts. But Jean Lidi and Jean Liren had lost too many beast souls. When Jean Litien witnessed Wang Qiu's abilities, he became a little worried about the other members from Shrek Academy, and so he opted to give everything he had so that he could defeat and kill both the female Dark Golden Terraclaw Bear and Wang Qiu as quickly as possible. Afterwards, he would take care of the other members from Shrek, as they were absolutely unwilling to let go of the male Dark Golden Terraclaw Bear's beast soul. Wang Qiu and the female Dark Golden Terraclaw Bear were starting to look a little desperate and unable to keep up under the circumstances. The Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor would produce a mighty impact every time it appeared, and it was so strong and terrifying that Wang Qiu was starting to lose her balance. Her 6 soul rings sparkled continuously as she amplified herself, and she tried to retaliate forcefully with her golden dragon spear. The fight became increasingly tiring for her, and if not for the fact that the Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor was afraid of the golden dragon spear's frightening draconic majesty, she would have probably fallen a long time ago. The female bear's situation was even more dire. She lashed out ferociously with her razor-sharp claws, but she couldn't fend off the 2 incredibly formidable beast souls. She was weakened from the start, and she had also taken a hit from the stationary soul cannon shell, so she was far from her peak condition. Dark golden fur flew into the sky as wounds that went down to the bone appeared on her body continuously. They can't hold on for much longer. Hua Yuhao called out in his mind. He could see with spiritual detection that the battle on the other side was still ongoing. The male Dark Golden Terraclaw Bear Beast Soul was exceptionally powerful, and it could still launch its own menacing attacks despite being outnumbered and besieged. Cai Maya was a titled Dolor, but she had to be a little more reserved in her battle in the interest of her students' safety. They were weakening it continuously, but they would still need a while longer before they could hurry over, while Wang Qiu's situation had become urgently perilous. How can I save her? Thoughts and ideas spun in Hua Yuhao's head as he raced to find a solution. They were 3 8-ringed evil soul masters, and he had no chance if he fought them face to face. He could just continue hiding himself like he was, but the 3 brothers would proceed to the other battlefield once they took care of Wang Qiu and the female bear. Hua Yuhao would then be safe and he could rendezvous with his companions. However, this thought never once occurred to him, and he never considered deserting his companion even though he had only met Wang Qiu a few times before. Clang! Wang Qiu collided once more with the Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor's sudden attack. She wasn't able to maintain her balance this time, and fell off the female bear's back while her golden dragon spear stabbed into the air at nothing at all. She was immediately in extreme danger. The female bear's enormous body was covering her as Wang Qiu's eyes suddenly sparkled with strange light. Right when she was in immense peril, she swung her golden dragon spear horizontally as she grabbed the fur on the female bear's back. An intense hostility erupted from her body, and a formless aura surged into the sky. The female bear seemed to have been acutely provoked in some way, and she knocked the scarlet golden lion and the netherworld ghost tiger away with 2 continuous paw swipes, while her body seemed to swell a little. Berserk! This was the Dark Golden Terraclaw Bear's frightening soul skill. But her body was already extremely weak at this point, so how could she maximize and unleash this soul skill's true power? Wang Qiu was still grabbing onto her fur with her right hand, while circle after circle of golden light expanded outward like spinning tops. A dash of grief flickered in her eyes, and she muttered, "I will avenge you." The three brothers' eyes flowed with suspicion and uncertainty. Their main powers as evil soul masters originated from their beast souls, and they had slain innumerable soul beasts during their lives. They were also exceptionally sensitive towards soul beasts' auras. They could clearly feel that this terrifying pressure came from a soul beast. However, they had never seen such a mighty and formidable ice-type soul beast within the Great Star-Do Forest in all their days. This place wasn't the extreme north. Still, this aura of ultimate ice and snow told them that they were in the presence of a soul beast that was ranked among the 10 great savage beasts. The three brothers were initially separated, and they realized in the next moment that they were lost. What astounded them even more was that they couldn't even feel each other's presence anymore. The ice and snow had sealed off their powerful senses, and the snowflakes sliced against their bodies constantly like sharp blades, attempting to tear them into pieces. This ultimate ice and frost was starting to consume their soul power. The radiance on Wang Qiu's right hand receded the moment this flurry of ice and snow appeared, and she felt a spiritual connection in the next moment. It's him. Wang Qiu immediately understood where all this ice and snow came from, and a shadow arrived next to her in the next moment. This person tugged on her hand and whispered, "Let's go. Quickly." Yes, the snowy dance of ultimate ice. Hu Yuhao's Empress Chill of the Snow Empress 3 ultimate techniques fused with his own domain of perpetual ice. Hu Yuhao didn't just release the domain's power, he imitated the Snow Empress aura as well. He relied on the domain's concealment to swiftly come to Wang Qiu's side. How could he just watch Wang Qiu meet her demise? Freednovel.cm The snowy dance of ultimate ice's area of effect wasn't that large. However, arresting his opponent's senses within the domain was the most important thing to Hu Yuhao at this moment. However, he was clear that the three brothers wouldn't be controlled like this for long, and they would soar into the sky when they realized that they couldn't find their way around inside the domain. The domain's strength would gradually decline the further up they went until the point where it vanished, so Hu Yuhao and Wang Qiu didn't have much time. Wang Qiu glanced at the female dark golden terraclaw bear as if she couldn't bear to leave her behind. Her eyes sparkled as she soared into the air, and Hu Yuhao reacted with astonishment as her golden dragon spear shone with brilliant golden light before it drilled right through the back of the female bear's brain. The female bear fell to the ground in the next moment, and large patches of dark golden light immediately surged through the golden dragon spear and into Wang Qiu's body. Hu Yuhao truly experienced Wang Qiu's formidable strength at this moment. The girl dragged him along when she leapt into the air, not burdened by his weight at all. That strength gave Hu Yuhao a feeling that he had no chance of fighting against it at all. Wang Qiu muttered coldly, "I would rather she die at my hands than end up in those three bastards' hands and become a tortured soul. Let's go." Hu Yuhao tugged on her once more. They used the domain as cover as they briskly proceeded towards the others from Shrek Academy. The three brothers struggled out from the explosion's aftershocks after a few seconds. Their faces were as black as could be. Jean Litian was raging as he said, "Bastard! They've killed that dark golden terraclaw bear Sao, too. Liren, go after those two little rascals. Lidi, go check out that bear and see if her beast soul is still intact. I'll go back for the male bear's beast soul, alright." Jean Liren transformed into a cloud as he raced in pursuit of Wang Qiu and Hu Yuhao. He activated his senses to the highest possible level as his ghost shadow leopard emperor followed closely behind him. Hu Yuhao had borrowed the cannon's recoil to propel himself backward. He had crashed into Wang Qiu and had meant for her to use this force to escape as quickly as they could. However, when their momentum was about to come to an end, he realized something wasn't right. Wang Qiu's body wasn't as tough as her strength made it seem. Rather, it was exceptionally soft and tender. Hu Yuhao had hugged Wang Donga before, and Wang Donga's body was a little bouncier, and the faint fragrance that a girl had would enchant him. Hu Yuhao felt a lot different as he came into contact with Wang Qiu at such a close distance. Wang Qiu's body was actually much softer than Wang Donga's body, and her aroma wasn't the fresh fragrance that young girls normally had. Instead, she smelled like sunlight. It was equally fragrant, but in a completely different style altogether. They landed onto the ground at the same time, and didn't even bother saying a word to each other as they turned around to run. They realized that they couldn't meet up with their companions anymore, and the only thing they could do was run, as the brothers' reach covered the entire region. They no longer had that dark golden terraclaw bear's aid, and their only outcome was death if this soul Dolor caught up with them. They turned around to run. Wang Qiu's right foot pushed off heavily against the ground, and a crack like an explosion was audible as she pulled Hui Yuhao along, and the two of them surged forward as if they were riding the clouds. This strength is just so fearsome, Hui Yuhao was thought, but he didn't stop moving. Right when their momentum was slowing down, he activated the soul thrusters on his back as he held onto her and raced forward once more. Their coordination was seamless. The two of them relied on this coordination as they meandered through the forest with lightning speed. Hui Yuhao's judgment was as accurate as ever, and they avoided all the vegetation as much as they could while they pushed forward frantically. "Let's split up," Wang Chua suddenly blurted. Hui Yuhao snapped around towards her and said solemnly, "No. Those evil soul masters have beast souls, and our splitting up will be equally futile. We can only run faster if we work together, and we will have a higher chance of survival." Wang Chua stared at him as she asked, "Why did you come to save me? Can't you tell that your girlfriend doesn't like me?" Hui Yuhao gazed straight ahead as they continued coordinating to push forward. He gave a very natural answer, "We're schoolmates, how can I just let you die?" Wang Chua's mouth twitched, and she said arrogantly, "I wouldn't have died." Wang Chua was extremely ferocious as her golden dragon spear transformed into a golden lightning bolt and arrived before the leopard. With spiritual detection, their cooperation was as seamless as if Wang Chua had been working together with Hui Yuhao for many years. The Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor was formidable, but it was still a little fearful of Wang Chua's golden dragon spear. Its body suddenly became illusory when the brilliant golden light was about to hit, and all Wang Chua struck was a shadow. Hui Yuhao's soul thrusters activated as they propelled him back to Wang Chua's position. He didn't use the snowy dance of ultimate ice. The domain was mighty, but it also limited their movement and freedom. This was especially true since this domain didn't distinguish between friends and enemies, so Wang Chua would also be affected inside this domain. Hui Yuhao believed that the domain would end up affecting their abilities and autonomy, and it would be over for them as long as Zhongluren had some patience, or if he had some attack that covered an area. Zhongluren was only one beat behind the leopard, and his poisonous gaze seemed like it was piercing right into Hui Yuhao and Wang Chua's souls. The Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor appeared next to him, and even though it was a beast soul, its brown body continuously emanated an intense pressure. "Run. Why aren't you guys running anymore? You think you can outrun my Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor with your speed? I originally believed that we had sustained heavy losses, but now my mind has changed. A dark golden Terraclaw soul bone, very good, that soul bone shall be mine. You guys have such power at such a young age, and it seems like your identities and experiences are quite extraordinary. It's a pity, because today will be the day you die. I will torture the two of you and listen to your agonizing wails for 7 days before I'll let the two of you die, to make up for my losses." Zhongluren had reverted back from his martial soul true body as he spoke. He was only faced with 2 young soul masters, and he didn't believe he would need his martial soul true body to fight. Hui Yuhao and Wang Chua were already dead in his eyes. Wang Chua's eyes had become entirely golden at this point. Hui Yuhao's eye of destiny was golden, but his own eyes had become dark blue in color, a hue that was filled with a chilling eeriness. How could this aura belong to 2 people who only had 5 and 6 soul rings? Their soul power undulations were close to, or had already reached that of a 7-ring soul sage. Hui Yuhao quickly calmed down after his momentary shock. He was very experienced with martial soul fusion, and he swiftly analyzed their martial soul fusion strengths and weaknesses. Relative to his martial soul fusion with Wang Donga, their current fusion greatly amplified each other in terms of both strength and soul power, to the point where it exceeded his connection with Wang Donga through the Haodong power. However, he had no idea what kind of martial soul fusion skills he would create with Wang Chua, but there could only be 2. He was also positive that these martial soul fusion skills would absolutely be assault-based. He had 4 martial soul fusion skills with Wang Donga, and that was considered a lot more versatile. Hui Yuhao analyzed the pros and cons, but he couldn't be sure. However, he was sure that his fusion with Wang Chua wasn't that far off from his fusion with Wang Donga. This was an unexpected surprise. His confidence to survive this ordeal was greatly boosted with this martial soul fusion, as Zhongluren had lost many beast souls during his previous battle. Zhongluren grunted coldly and raised his staff into the air as a horde of beast souls swarmed out in an instant, pouncing right towards Hui Yuhao and Wang Chua. His Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor vanished soundlessly into the air, or rather, it disappeared within the mass of beast souls. Hui Yuhao raised his right hand, and a dark blue longsword appeared in his palms. Unparalleled chill, Emperor's Sword. Initially, he would have to adjust his soul power and wait for a while after he unleashed his Emperor's Sword for a single strike, while this move consumed much of his soul power. However, his martial soul fusion with Wang Chua allowed him to nearly solidify his Emperor's sword to the point where it was almost physically material. 3 beams of light erupted from Hui Yuhao's 3 eyes at the same time. His light of destiny felt as if it was going to absorb all light around it, and his purplish golden spiritual shock struck Zhong Liren at almost the same time. Zhong Liren had already been wary of the vertical eye on Hui Yuhao's head, hence he had been preparing to defend himself against it this entire time. His body transformed into grey mist as these 3 beams appeared, as he released his martial soul true body yet again. However, he didn't understand Hui Yuhao's abilities at all. His transformation into mist could weaken normal attacks against him greatly, but Hui Yuhao's 3 beams of light weren't normal attacks at all. Zhong Liren's mist was formidable, but it defended against physical attacks in the end, and could partially protect him against soul power attacks at most. However, there was no way he could defend himself against spiritual attacks. The light of destiny was the first to reach him, and it instantly tainted his grey mist golden. His martial soul true body froze in an instant. He didn't feel like he was hit at all, but an intense insecurity and uneasiness surfaced in his heart. The 2 streaks of spiritual shock came immediately afterwards. Wang Qiu's golden dragon spear swung out and glowed with endless golden light as every single beast soul was forced back. Her golden dragon spear released a spear light that was almost a meter long because of the martial soul fusion, and there was a feeling like she represented a force of justice so strong that no unholy beings dared to come near. The Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor ambushed her from the darkness, but even it was repelled, and the 2 of them only took several steps back this time. Hui Yuhao unleashed his Emperor's sword. He supported Wang Qiu's efforts with streak after streak of sword light, and he began to chant a curse that was impossible to discern before peculiar spiritual undulations began to ripple from his body. Wang Qiu continued slashing around with her golden dragon spear as she turned around towards him. Her eyes were filled with astonishment. She could clearly feel that Hui Yuhao's spiritual undulations were extremely sinister, and so strong that they seemed to resonate with her very soul. The dark blue light receded, and Hui Yuhao's Emperor's sword vanished at the same time, while his eyes were replaced with a dash of grey. It was a color filled with barrenness and emptiness, but this greyness only flashed once and disappeared before his eyes sparkled and turned white. This was a hue that was charged with a saintly aura, and his incantations became hastier and more hurried. The beast souls that were already disorganized in the sky gradually slowed down as they heard this chant, and every single one turned their eyes toward him. The beast souls' eyes no longer seemed hysterical or violent. Instead, their eyes were filled with an indescribable delight, and this included even that Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor, which slowed down and no longer attacked. It was different from the other beast souls, as the Leopard Emperor still retained some of its original willpower, and its eyes sparkled with uncertainty and doubt. Wang Qiu didn't know what Hui Yuhao was doing, but he could tell that this was advantageous for them. Right at this moment, Zhong Liren recovered on the other side. 2 spiritual shocks, one after another, and the bad luck that plagued his body affected him severely, and blood was pouring from his eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. Wounds on a spiritual level were much more frightening than physical wounds, and Zhong Liren had never expected a youngster like Hui Yuhao to possess such incredible power. He had been wary and vigilant, but he was still struck anyway. A circle of pure white light rippled from Hui Yuhao's head. A strange chittering could be heard from the beast souls wherever this light reached. This white radiance brushed past their bodies, but it didn't harm them at all. These beast souls were originally blood-colored, but they quickly turned white before they turned pale and dissipated into the air. Hui Yuhao's face was paper pale at this point. He stumbled backwards, and would have crumbled to the ground if Wang Qiu hadn't been holding onto him. The only beast soul that wasn't purified from the white light was Zhong Liren's origin beast soul, the Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor. However, the Ghost Shadow Leopard Emperor began to exude large amounts of brown mist as the white light shone upon it, and it howled painfully as it was drawn back into Zhong Liren's staff. Zhong Liren howled agonizingly as well, and vomited a huge pool of blood. There was only fear in his eyes as he stared at Hui Yuhao, as if he were staring at the devil. You also an evil soul master? How is that possible? How can you purify the power of spirits? Who are you? Are you the Holy Son? Hui Yuhao was in such a feeble state that he couldn't really talk anymore. What he had unleashed was the light of purification that he had inherited from Electrolux's necromancy. The previous 2 strikes were meant to give him time, and the light of destiny was to curse the opponent with bad fortune, which was also equivalent to bestowing good fortune upon himself. If the beasts had been under Zhong Liren's control, his light of destiny probably wouldn't have worked. In the end, the gap in their cultivations was still huge, and Hui Yuhao definitely didn't have an advantage even in terms of spiritual power. He had succeeded, relying on the fact that his opponent didn't really understand his abilities, and exerting himself far beyond his usual standards. He had relied on his boosted spiritual power from the fusion with Wang Chua to forcibly cleanse the great majority of Zhongluren's beast souls. There had been multiple 10,000-year beast souls among that group. If he hadn't been successful, there would have been no way he or Wang Chua could defend themselves against frightening attacks from so many beast souls. The light of destiny's judgment had aided him yet again. Zhongluren was completely rooted to the spot in fright at this moment. I'm not an evil soul master. I've been sent by the heavens to take care of evil soul masters like you. Hu Yuhao forcibly stabilized himself, and tried his best to keep his balance with the spiritual power that Wang Chua was sending over. He couldn't display any weakness at this point. Wang Chua raised the golden dragon spear high into the air, the spearhead burst with golden light and her 6 soul rings sparkled alternately. The identical golden light on both their bodies suddenly became intense, and she turned sideways and leaned into Hu Yuhao's embrace. A miraculous scene happened. Peculiar lights began to contort the moment their bodies were plastered together, and everything within 100 meters around them became golden in color, while an enormous golden vertical eye hovered in midair. Hu Yuhao's body seemed to disintegrate into 1,000,000 golden beams that swept onto Wang Chua's body. Every single beam would leave a brilliant and colorful streak on Wang Chua's body, while a suit of armor gradually appeared on Wang Chua's body wherever they passed. The chest plate appeared first. Radiant ice crystal patterns shimmered on the chest plate, and began to extend all around her. What was even more peculiar was that a vertical eye actually emerged on Wang Chua's forehead. It was the Eye of Destiny, identical to the one that belonged to Hu Yuhao. The eye sparkled with golden light, and one could tell upon closer inspection that the golden vertical eye's lights belonged to Hu Yuhao. The light of purification was like a calamity to him. Furthermore, he was still plagued with the light of destiny that had brought him great misfortune. Then there was this martial soul fusion skill that looked as formidable as a king. All this came together to fill Zhongluren's heart with fear. Even evil soul masters feared death. He had lost so many beast souls in this ordeal, and his strength had been massively reduced. He didn't dare to meet Wang Chua with force anymore. Zhongluren transformed into a ball of mist in a flash, and he bolted into the distance at lightning speed as he released his martial soul true body. He was admittedly incredibly quick in this mist form. The spear's rose gold light gradually receded, and the armor on Wang Chua's body slowly broke down and reverted into flowing streaks of light. The space around her began to contort as these streaks transformed back into Hu Yuhao once more. Hu Yuhao trembled when he reappeared, and began to fall. Wang Chua hurriedly went to support him and whispered, "How are you feeling?" Zhongluren had been frightened away, but the truth was that Hu Yuhao was now extremely weak, and had overdrafted his spirit and soul power. He had practically raced against time with his 3 strikes of spiritual shock. To him, spiritual power consumption wasn't a problem, but the problem was how quickly he used it in succession. 3 continuous instances drew too much from his spiritual sea, to the point where a crack seemed like it was going to appear, and Hu Yuhao's own spirit had sustained a powerful impact. He had greatly amplified Wang Chua's abilities when he transformed into that armor, and there was no doubt that this was a martial soul fusion skill that they had yet to give a name to. However, could they face off against an 8-ringed soul Dolor with just that martial soul fusion skill? The answer was no. Hu Yuhao was too weak at this point, and their martial soul fusion skill's amplification wasn't as powerful as it looked on the outside. Wang Chua contributed most of it. Furthermore, they realized that their soul power was consumed at an alarming rate when they unleashed this martial soul fusion skill. That single transformation and strike had consumed roughly 30% of their soul power. This meant that they could only use this martial soul fusion skill 3 times, and they would revert to normal after 3 strikes. Zhongluren didn't have his beast souls to assist him, but he could probably take 3 hits with his cultivation. Hu Yuhao and Wang Chua had astonished him too much, and his underestimation from the start became overestimation in the end, and he let this opportunity to kill them slip away. "I'm all right. Let's get out of here," Hu Yuhao spoke softly as he closed his eyes. He didn't know if Zhongluren would suddenly think it through and make his way back here, so leaving this place was something they absolutely had to do. "Okay." Wang Chua acknowledged. She carried Hu Yuhao and lengthened her stride as she sped in a certain direction. What made Hu Yuhao angsty was that he was a man, but Wang Chua was carrying him on her shoulders. This girl was just too strong, to the point where he felt as light as a feather. The ride wasn't that turbulent, and Hu Yuhao was gradually recovering, but he still didn't feel so good inside. He tried his best to stabilize his spiritual sea. His spirit had been wounded to a certain degree, and he would need about half a month to return to normal. Zhong Liren is gone. I wonder how Wang Donga and the others are doing. Hui Yuhao closed his eyes and tried to picture Wang Donga. Wang Qiu's image suddenly surfaced from the deepest parts of his mind. Their martial soul fusion was the most substantial reason why they managed to scare Zhong Liren away before. Without their martial soul fusion and without Wang Qiu's support and amplification, Hui Yuhao wouldn't have received such an intense negative backlash, while his two spiritual shocks wouldn't have been so powerful. The final move that made Zhong Liren turn tail and run was their martial soul fusion skill. How can my martial soul fuse with hers? Even though this fusion is different from my fusion with Donga, she's still a little too similar to Donga. They look so alike, and they can both fuse their martial souls with mine. Hui Yuhao had never heard of a soul master who was able to undergo martial soul fusion with two other soul masters at the same time from all his lessons at Shrek Academy. There was no question that he had invented something new once again. Thoughts were spinning in Hui Yuhao's head, and Wang Qiu felt the same way. She had always believed that she was the strongest amongst all the students in Shrek Academy that were around her level, and she included all the students from the inner courtyard who had less than 7 rings in this analysis. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.